You miserable old hag without a penny to your name. You're in our way, we'll take all of it. Just after Dad's funeral, my brother's wife kicked Mom out. I was shocked by her cruelty. It seemed impossible that anyone could be that heartless. My anger flared up, and I was ready to confront my brother and his wife. But Mom stopped me. She whispered, "That girl, she's blinded by," her words trailed off, and I looked at her, trying to understand. I'm Bonnie, just an ordinary office worker at a mid-sized company. Our family runs a well-known, upscale restaurant in our hometown. Something that always surprises people since they don't see me as connected to fine dining. But honestly, I have little involvement now. My brother, Rel, took after Dad as a chef, and his wife, Aita, helps manage the business. They're clearly set to take over, leaving no place for me. Dad was a chef and a visionary, building the restaurant's reputation in just one generation. At work, he was tough and exacting, which I'm sure weighed on Mom, my brother, and Aita, who all worked alongside him. But at home, he was a loving father, full of laughter and kindness. I cherished him for that. One day, I received an urgent call from Mom at work. "Your father collapsed. Come to the hospital now." The tension in her voice was unmistakable. I rushed over to find her speaking quietly with the doctor, both looking solemn. "Mom, is Dad okay?" I asked once the doctor stepped away, feeling a pit in my stomach. Mom, watching Dad with a pained expression, held his hand. His hands were thick and calloused, the hands of a craftsman I adored. "He's stable for now, but there will be lasting effects," she said quietly. The doctor explained Dad would likely lose movement on his right side. Losing the ability to use his dominant hand was bound to devastate him. Mom and I shared a long, silent sigh. Then my sister-in-law Aita arrived. "Is my father-in-law all right?" Her voice broke the silence, and at first, I thought she was genuinely concerned. But once she learned about Dad's condition and the prognosis, her face shifted, a smugness creeping in. "Well, he can't cook anymore. Guess that makes the restaurant ours," she sneered. I was stunned. Aita, usually so quiet, agreeable, and considerate toward Mom and Dad, seemed like a different person. I couldn't reconcile her sudden coldness with the sister-in-law I knew. "She's showing her true colors," Mom murmured, her voice tinged with resignation. "She hid it well, but she's heartless." Though I was reeling from Alita's reaction, my main concern was Dad's health. Still, I left the hospital that day shaken and confused. 2 weeks later, Dad was discharged and came home. His once strong body was now frail, and he couldn't even manage simple tasks alone. Sometimes his frustration spilled over, leading to angry outbursts. Worried about Mom, who was tirelessly taking care of him, I started visiting more frequently to help. "You come here way too often. It's annoying," Aita muttered with her usual disdain, but I ignored her. My only concern was Mom, who seemed more exhausted each time I visited. She was taking care of Dad, preparing meals, bathing him, everything on her own, despite occasionally hiring a helper. My brother and Aita, living in the same house, not only refused to help but didn't even prepare meals for Mom. "Mom, it's too much for you alone. I could quit my job and move in to help care for Dad full-time," I offered one evening, frustrated by my brother's and Alita's neglect. Mom just smiled. "Thank you, sweetheart, but I'm managing, don't worry." She was pushing herself, I could tell, and I was increasingly afraid she'd collapse from exhaustion. Then things took a grim turn. As Dad's spirits waned, he started showing signs of dementia. "Who are you?" he asked me one day. It was painful. My once commanding father now barely recognized me. "Pitiful, isn't he?" Aita sneered from the doorway, her contempt cut deeply, more so than Dad's memory loss. "Your father-in-law smells. If you want to keep staying here, don't make waves," she snapped, pinching her nose and looking at Dad in disgust. Mom ignored her, likely holding back to avoid escalating things. Aita muttered something under her breath and left the room. "It's okay, dear," Mom whispered soothingly to Dad. Watching my parents endure such treatment from my brother and Aita made me want to cry. With Dad's dementia worsening and his health deteriorating, it was soon clear we couldn't care for him at home much longer. One day, my brother unexpectedly called. I picked up, hoping he had finally decided to help Mom. I tried to bring up Alita's cruel behavior, but he brushed it off, jumping straight into his own concerns. He asked me to help out at the restaurant on weekends. Shocked at his selfishness, I told him I'd discuss it with Mom before giving an answer, then ended the call. I immediately called Mom, sharing my brother's request with her. That's when she revealed the real reason he wanted my help. The longtime staff and chefs are quitting one after another, almost no one's left. They all say they can't work with Alita's approach. I haven't been to the restaurant myself in a while, so I don't know all the details, Mom explained. Although she was no longer part of the restaurant's daily operations, her concern was clear. She had helped build that place with Dad, and her attachment to it was strong. She cared about the employees, 2, those who had been through the highs and lows with them. I could hear the disappointment in her voice at how things had deteriorated. I'll go to the restaurant this weekend to help out and see for myself what's going on. Try not to worry, I reassured her. Since I wouldn't be around to help with Dad's care, we arranged for him to go to daycare that weekend. At the restaurant, I changed into a uniform I hadn't worn in years. Memories came flooding back, but the scene around me was entirely different. I didn't recognize a single face. Young servers, sporting piercings and bold tattoos that Dad would never have allowed, stumbled around awkwardly with trays. The restaurant itself had changed, too, renovated in ways that felt unfamiliar. As I walked around to reacquaint myself, a loud burst of laughter caught my attention. Over at a large, connected set of tables, I saw my sister-in-law Aita hosting a gathering of about 30 women around her age. She was at the center of it all, raising a glass of wine. "My friends, all the dishes here are premium and delicious," she announced. "Today, it's on me, so indulge yourselves, truffles, foie gras, the works." Using an empty wine bottle as a microphone, she toasted the group, earning loud cheers. I rushed over to her, trying to rein her in. "Aita, you can't be serious. Running up this kind of tab will put the restaurant at a huge loss." Aita turned to me, her festive smile vanishing as she scowled. "Quiet, will you? A sister-in-law who can't even get married has no right to lecture me. This is my restaurant, and I'll do whatever I please." I held her gaze. "This is my parents' restaurant." I bit back my words and stepped away from the table. The restaurant was in shambles. The kitchen was buckling under the onslaught of orders from my sister-in-law's group, who were treating the place like an all-you-can-eat buffet. Meanwhile, the regular customers, some who had been loyal since Dad's early days, grew frustrated with the delays. Many left in a huff, grumbling, "How long do they expect us to wait?" It was heartbreaking. I'd never seen these familiar faces so disappointed. Recognizing how dire things had become, I tried to convince the chefs to pause service to my sister-in-law's table and prioritize the other guests, but they hesitated, worried about backlash from her. Aita ordered us to put her table first, the head chef muttered, visibly uncomfortable. My brother, meanwhile, was glued to a horse racing broadcast, oblivious to the chaos around him. Perhaps he'd only followed Dad into this profession out of expectation. Now, with Dad gone, he was simply doing Alita's bidding. I approached Aita again, intending to reason with her about the service issues. Just then, a longtime employee quietly informed her, "We can't serve that dish anymore. We're out of truffles." Alita's face twisted in anger. "Then go buy some," she yelled, hurling an empty plate in the employee's direction. She was acting less like an owner and more like a rowdy, entitled customer. Watching the scene, I finally understood why so many of the long-serving staff had left. "I'm thinking of renaming this place," she announced to her friends, a sly grin on her face. "The current name is so old-fashioned. I want something stylish." "Cool," she laughed, glancing around for approval. The restaurant Dad had built from the ground up was gone. The heart and legacy had vanished along with the original staff and decor. After my shift, I headed to the locker room, my mind heavy with how to break the news to Mom. She would be heartbroken to know her beloved restaurant had fallen so far. As I walked home, the weight of it all bore down on me. The next day, I visited Mom and told her everything I'd seen. She listened, then sighed deeply. "I feared this might happen. Your brother has been under Alita's thumb since your father fell ill. Without him, the restaurant couldn't survive." Her voice trembled, and I saw her eyes fill with tears. I tried to hold back my own. "I'm sorry, Mom. I wish I could have done more to protect it for you and Dad." She gently patted my shoulder. "It's all right, dear. Maybe it's time to let go." After that, I refused each of my brother's calls asking for help. As time passed, his complaints about Aita began to seep into our conversations. She was still hosting friends, treating them to endless free meals, and the restaurant was drowning in debt. They struggled to pay suppliers, and despite the lack of funds, Aita still pushed to renovate the restaurant into a trendy cafe bar. "That's not my problem," I would say and hang up, detaching myself from the wreckage. They could do as they pleased with the restaurant. All I wanted was peace for Mom and Dad. A few months later, Dad passed away from pneumonia. The funeral was packed with people, chefs Dad had trained, familiar patrons, and neighbors who remembered his kindness. Mom received everyone graciously, despite her sorrow. "You must be tired, mother-in-law," Aita said, stepping forward. "Why don't you rest in the back? I'll take care of the guests." Even at the funeral, Aita seemed eager to assert herself as the family's representative. "No, I'm the one greeting our guests," Mom replied firmly. Aita frowned and walked away, clearly irritated. Under Mom's steady presence, the funeral went smoothly. As people paid their respects, I saw how many knew what my brother and Aita had done since Dad fell ill. None of them even looked in their direction. All day, my brother and his wife wore awkward, uncomfortable expressions. I wish they'd just stay out of sight, I thought, watching them from a distance. After the cremation, as Mom and I prepared to leave with Dad's ashes, Aita approached us. You two should renounce your inheritance, she declared, her tone brazen. The restaurant, the house, the money, it's all ours. After all we went through with that old man, it's only fair. Her audacity was staggering. You penniless old woman, you're nothing to us now, she sneered at Mom, her expression icy. Leave the house and don't contact us, we're not family anymore. Fury boiled inside me. I was ready to confront her, but Mom grasped my arm, stopping me. She looked up at me with calm, resolute eyes. It's okay, honey, it's over now, she whispered, squeezing my hand. Aita laughed and sauntered away. I wanted to chase after her, but Mom held me back, still calm. Once Aita was out of sight, she released my hand and looked at me, a gentle smile on her face. That girl, she's done for. Mom's words puzzled me. She didn't explain further and resumed gathering her things. You'll understand in time, she added, holding Dad's ashes with that familiar, gentle smile. After she left the house, Mom came to live with me in my condo. To my surprise, she had saved a substantial amount of money under her own name over the years. Apparently, Dad had made sure she received a generous salary, which she had carefully invested in stocks and other assets. This place is far too cramped, Mom remarked one day. Let's buy something more spacious. And so, she started searching for a new home for the two of us. 3 months later, I got a frantic call from my sister-in-law. Why didn't you warn me about father-in-law's debts? There's a scary debt collector here, sitting in the restaurant. What are you going to do about it? She shouted. Mom, who was nearby, heard every word. Mom took the phone from me, a mischievous glint in her eyes. Oh, Aita, it's been a while. Yes, your father-in-law was a soft-hearted man and signed as a guarantor on some significant debts. I managed the repayments until now, but it's your responsibility from here on out. After all, you're taking the full inheritance, aren't you? Mom said with a chuckle, her voice light, but her eyes steely. My apologies, mother-in-law. Alita's tone shifted abruptly, pleading, let's come back together and run the restaurant, please, let's start over. Mom's voice dropped to a chilly tone I'd never heard before. I'll have nothing to do with either of you again. Ignoring Alita's pleas, she ended the call. She handed the phone back to me, smiling. Block her number, please. By then, we'd moved into a spacious condo, our new home, where my brother and his wife would never find us. Later, through neighbors, I heard that my family's restaurant had closed for good. My brother and Aita lost the restaurant, their home, and nearly everything they owned to repay debts. Now, they work long hours in a chain restaurant, living in a small apartment where they can often be heard arguing. Mom and I recently marked Dad's 3rd death anniversary with a meal at a new restaurant opened by his former apprentice. The flavors were exactly as Dad used to prepare, each bite bringing back warm memories. That evening, as we reminisced about him over an array of gourmet dishes, we found ourselves at peace and grateful for a fresh start.